Okay, we are live for the latest episode of Business Stream. I am Nick Haralambous. If you don't know by now, this is Mike Sharman wearing a lovely pink jacket. Love the style. Mike, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, man. So if this is your first time here, you're sitting on Crowdcast. The platform is great. If you look at the bottom of your screen, it says all sorts of interesting things. One of them is ask a question. If you have a question, nice, Mike. Yes, we're at the bottom of the screen. If you have a question, please click the ask a question button, and then everyone else can vote up the questions they like. There is a poll. I might add another one in later just to keep you engaged and on your toes. But for now, if you are here and awake and you can hear us, please send us a wave in the chat, just so that I know who's around and alive and kicking. This is very interactive, so feel free to tell Mike and I we're talking bullshit, and we will challenge you on that. So Mike, everyone baits. Say again?
Or we'll just have our own dialogue. Oh, there's a hey guys.
Exactly. We'll just ignore everyone. So Mike, why don't you kick off by telling us who you are, why we should care, and immediately then tell me what Brandalism is.
Cool. Mike Sharman. I'm the co-founder of an agency called Retroviral. We've made more brands go globally viral than any other agency in Africa. And for us, virality is not just about eyeballs and about millions of views. It's actually about converting views to sales or some kind of adoption of a product or service. Otherwise, we're just in the vanity metrics game. And Brandalism is a concept that is part of my new book that I'm writing. And it's all around deconstructing the status quo of how brands do things traditionally. It's basically vandalizing your slogans, vandalizing your way of thinking, and moving forward in this crazy new world that changes by the day.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly, I hate saying this word, I use it cautiously, but incredibly lucky timing with Brandalism, actually, because if there ever was a time to screw with your brand, it's now.
Yeah, and we're seeing so much of it. Obviously, we've seen the negative backlash of the guys in McDonald's with Rio or Sao Paulo. Actually, they had the golden arches. They separated it and was like encouraging social distancing. And so many people jumped on that, saying, "Oh, cuck trick. That is something that the ad guys are just going to try and win an award with." But then when you look more close to home, the likes of MTN, how they've changed their slogan to everywhere you stay instead of everywhere you go, and how Vodacom on this scrolly part of our screens here at the top, it actually says stay safe every time I access my phone. So that's pretty awesome. And then we've seen some cool stuff with Jeep internationally, where they've taken the circles and the little grill structure of their logo, and then they've converted that using remote controls, top-down views of coffee cups and little wireless chargers to reinvent and brandalize their logo.
That's clever, but I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but that's obviously just very aesthetic. That's the top level of this Brandalism concept you're talking about. You're obviously not writing a whole book on how to screw with your tagline and logo. So like, what are the deeper things that brands should be looking at to unpack and get rid of?
Yeah, so Brandalism actually started as a trend when a Scottish artist went and vandalized billboards and covered all of the the kind of vanity-based advertising messages, and he actually replaced it with poetry, and that gained some momentum, and more artists started doing that in the UK, in Ireland, and in Scotland. And more recently, we've seen a real move towards Brandalism in Australia, where the Prime Minister was anti-climate change, and you've seen a whole host of people go and vandalize bus stops and start incorporating very Australian iconography, like Blinky Bill running away from the fire, and Crocodile Dundee, and all these kinds of icons that are typically Australian, to showcase that they're standing up against someone's view that climate change is a hoax or fake news. And obviously with the book, we look at delving into ways that you as an individual, or you as an SME, or you even as a large corporate, how do you stop and really start deciding on reconstructing where you're at as a brand? For me, the last few years, people have obsessed over purpose, the why. All of these buzzwords have infiltrated our boardrooms and our Zoom calls nowadays. But for me, I'm not a purpose-driven person. I'm a manifesto-driven person, because I feel like that purpose at times can become too one-dimensional. It can become too linear in its thinking. And manifesto really drills down into your hearts, your guts, and your belief. And those changes can ultimately impact what you as a business need to do to work forward from there.
Okay, so I mean, let's stick with that for a bit. Obviously, it's trying times for brands across the board. Do you think that small businesses, big businesses, any brand should be reassessing what their vision and mission statements are, and like, if so, why? Like, why is it now a time for a different kind of brand?
Well, what's interesting with these business unusual times is that there is no normal. The new normal changes on the daily basis. Like every few weeks, we tune into ENCA or SABC to see what the president has to say and to see how our world is going to change again. So the ability to be absolutely nimble is now the most largest requirement for everybody. We're doing a lot of crisis comms for corporates internally and talking to their teams. And for me, we bang on a lot about it being the age of the influencer, and the influencer is your employee influencer. It's your employee advocacy. And if you really want to make a change and want to move forward, we've seen with the research, it shows that people are now more than ever more skeptical of messaging. They want authenticity, they want community, they want tribe, they want culture more than anything. And in terms of staff and brands, if you don't have your people on your side buying into what you're saying, the people whose salaries you pay, then how are people in the real world going to actually buy into any of your branding and corporate BS? So start with the inside, start with that golden center and that core and that really important middle, and then move out into the rest of the world if that's what you're going to deliver on.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that shift from massive influencer, these influencers who've got 2 billion friends and followers and whatever. I love the shift away from that towards the micro influencer, where I want you to truly believe in my product and then tell someone that truly believes in you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Kevin Kelly said many years ago, the Wired founder, about finding 1,000 true fans. So where I want to go with the question here is, brands are these abstracted things now. You know, Vodacom's got a brand, Nando's has a brand, but a lot of people watching are small businesses. How do you build a brand? And for me, it's about quality of product and those sorts of things. So like, where do you start, right, if you're trying to reinvent a brand?
I'm glad you asked, Nick. This almost feels like you teed me up before with the actual question.
I really didn't.
Everybody on the right-hand side, this is full-on improv. But I'll give you a real-world example pre-COVID, but it still is relevant for smaller brands and even SMEs alike. About 2 years ago, Biogen approached us and said, listen, we are the supplement brand. We're in a sea of supplements. There's USN, there's all these larger competitors with huge budgets. How do we actually compete with them? And for us, you know, they wanted to be the most authentic health and wellness brand in the market. And if you want to be authentic, you've got to pretty much live and breathe authenticity. So I took one of my best mates who has obviously got a little bit overweight and he's feeling unhealthy. And I've tried my best since we lived in London together. This isn't a fat shame. We lived in London together, and he got the Heathrow injection. That's the reality. Can't deny that. And from there, I said, listen, this is my mate. His name is Hobbo. That's his nickname. And he's 32 years old. He has a discovery vitality age of about 55 plus. His hair is spinning. He looks terrible. Sorry, Hobbo, I love you. And let's use him because he's never run a 5K. And similarly, he's never even posted to Instagram. So he was our ultimate influencer, the absolute antithesis of an influencer. And for 10 months, we documented very low production quality. We'd shoot a video once a month with him, and we'd showcase his journey of what he was doing, from everything that he was eating, the change of diet, the slow consistency and change to exercise. And everything was about a 10-month journey where we could showcase via Facebook, which that was their most active platform at the time, and get Hobbo to start walking and then start jogging and start cycling. And I would go on rides with him. We rode Amashover together. I had the GoPro on my bike and trying to make sure that we followed the journey with him, and we created a cult movement behind him where people on Facebook could follow, they could get involved. And on the back of that, we then encouraged people to share their own hashtag Biogen journey. So here was just one overweight white dude, but anybody in the community, regardless of race or gender or background, whether you wanting to do your first park run or wanting to run a PB at Comrades, this appealed to all different shapes and sizes of people in so many manners. And then even when we'd go to events in the Cradle for some triathlon practice, and people would come up to him and say, "Hey, Hobbo, I'm following your journey. Craig Rodney and I climbed up the mountain the other day when we could still move around freely." And he said, "How's Hobbo doing? You were such an inspiration to even Craig climbing the mountain, you know." So in terms of influence, we took this guy who was an average Joe, nobody knew about him, wasn't a celebrity, he had nothing to kind of pay it forward for. He wasn't just a hired gun like so many other influencers are. And he came out the other side and he finished that half Ironman, 70.3 Durban Ironman, 1.9 kilometer swim, 90 kilometer cycle, and 21 kilometer run. He did it all within the allocated 8 hours and 30 minutes with 15 minutes to spare.
Amazing. So I think the point that you're making here is authenticity and use the product, right? That's how you build a brand. Like I was following a Twitter thread yesterday. People were asking about how do you virally kick off some kind of new brand? Well, for me, it's good product. If you have a good product, people will talk about it, and you just have to spur that on a little bit. So that's a good example.
And the great thing was that they experienced a 20% growth year on year in terms of the actual sales. And they had the salespeople in Discam, you know, they were excited about it. They were also like, wow, they were following the journey. They were sending him their message of support. So it leveraged that entire ecosystem. And shout out to Sadler Belts, who turns 30 today. I saw your tweet today. Surviving 30 years.
Andrew's doing a good job of hitting that PR. That's how you build a brand, eh? It's just hit everyone up, and
Andrew.
Brilliant. Good work. Yeah, good work. Sadler Belts. Maybe you can also get some that are non-leather for the vegans in the world. So I want to highlight a question here from Stephen, since we're not that far off the vision and mission. So he wants to know, how do you differentiate between a vision, a mission, and a manifesto? You said you're a manifesto guy. What's the difference?
So a manifesto for me is almost like a call to arms that gets not only yourself, but also your entire workforce excited about what it is that you buy in and what you believe in. About a year and a half ago, I was sitting, not texting and driving, just in a car. And I started having these thoughts about, like, what does retroviral stand for as a business? What are the things that identify not with me, but also with the people who work for and with me? And for me, I started making some lines and writing them about how, you know, we're the unusual agency, like we're the anti-agency, in the sense that, you know, we were these kids that had, we all a little bit messed up, and we all a little bit cooked, if we're completely honest. And I started writing these lines about, you know, we all had insecurities when we were younger, but, you know, the thing that we're super incredibly great at is comms. And for us, like, we love challenging our clients. We are the challenger brand champions, and we are these viral scientists. We rationally elevate brands and emotionally drive connections with them thereof. And I put together a little manifesto that is kind of like the précis version of this, and I sent it around on the company WhatsApp group and asked everyone, like, does this resonate? And based on their feedback, we then tinkered with it, and we effectively built what was almost a non-sing-songy version of an anthem that everyone in the company had some kind of input on and could buy into or choose to agree or disagree with. And for me, like, that's so much more powerful, because it's not just a vision, a mission, or a purpose, like as per your question, but it goes to the actual granular detail and the core of what you believe in. So you can always then start identifying what true north looks like for you. It then also allows you to go after clients that suit your personality. We work incredibly well with challenger brands, but we're not as well suited to maybe your one or two in the marketplace, because a lot of those brands have been through the hardships, they've been through the struggle, and now they're in a market leading position. They're safe, they're going to take less risks, and we are much more catered to brands that don't have the hugest budgets, but they need to take risks.
Yeah, actually, a really interesting way to look at this. There's a couple of things I'm going to pull out from what you just said. The first that I love is the segue into what I'm researching and spending a lot of my life on at the moment is curiosity. And your differentiation between challenger brands and established. I'm actually looking at these established brands and saying, are they curious? Are they looking at what's coming? And are they trying to shift away from it instead of being efficient? And like the quarterly results, the quarterly profit reporting, staff efficiency, that's what big brands do. they don't challenge themselves. And that's why you like working with challenger brands, right?
Mm.
They're constantly looking for a new way to go. And so I think curiosity, the thing that I like about your story is you went, what is it about retroviral? Like, I'm curious, what is the point that we're trying to make? And you push it a bit further. And then the second thing I want to pull out is that you went to your team. A lot of people building vision, mission, purpose statements push it top down. That is not the way to build a brand. If you're hiring people and they don't believe in your manifesto and they don't relate and resonate to you, you're screwed from the beginning. So I absolutely love that you went down into your team and got their feedback, because they're you. They're the ones at the coalface.
And then obviously to your point, I mean, I love the curious element, because you have to keep asking questions. Like, my problem with the current education system is that we aren't producing enough critical thinkers. And that's where we struggle when I like to hire fresh people straight out of varsity. They haven't been abused by a system that has taught them to learn in a specific agency way. I like to go in there and say, listen, you're beautiful, special little unicorns, and let's go snowflakes. Let's make this work. But for me, asking those questions is so important. And the second thing is for the smaller businesses out there and the teams needing to pivot right now. If you're in manufacturing and you need to manufacture masks, for example, or whatever that may be during COVID-19, business unusual. For me, I'm not a business plan fan, hate business plans, because you only really start understanding how people use your business or product or service when you release it into the market. And exactly to your point, you can't just tell from the top down how your things should be used and how your service should be used if you've never had real world customers to actually use them. And that's why I'm no business plan fan, and I'm businesses that generate revenue from day one, not grow audiences, and just hope one day there'll be miraculously be a business model that comes off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Both really valuable points. And I think if there ever was a time for you to start being curious about what the hell you're doing, and is this the right business? Is this the right staff? Are these people believing in my manifesto? Now's the time. I mean, I keep using this example and lots of people laugh, but you know, when you get a really nice bottle of alcohol, expensive champagne, and you're like, no, I'll open it on a special occasion. Now is the time. You should be drinking that shit now. We're in a global pandemic. The world will never be more messed up than it is right now. So now is the time to challenge your brand, challenge your team, challenge your revenue models, and dig into those things while you're sitting on your hands waiting for lockdown to end.
And it's the perfect time for feedback. I see Mike Joubert. Hi, Mike. He says, spot on there. Here's the crazy ones. We're busy developing a product that it was going to take us maybe 6 to 12 months, a digital product for athletes. I've shared some screens with you. And for me, I've used the opportunity to actually accelerate the growth of this product and to then start asking people that I trust and people whose opinions I value what they think about the product. So I've asked yourself, I've asked Mike on the screen there, and I've started getting some really interesting feedback in terms of where we go next. So exactly to your point, don't use the time to just bide your time and wait for the next address from Cyril and just see what level of lock shedding we're into, but actually try and utilize that time to do. And I mean, you're better than anyone can talk about doing, because I think the only thing you're not doing is not doing.
Yeah, geez, I'm exhausted, man. But that's a separate live stream altogether. So I want to pose a statement to you that I'm sure you hear a lot, and I want your response to that statement. But Nando's did it. Why can't we?
Oh, yeah, that old chestnut. So, yeah, I think the reality of it is that once again, Nando's has a very clearly defined, really articulated vision in its manifesto and in its understanding. And I mean, that's a brand that's 30 years old. So you can't expect to have that kind of understanding of yourself. Think about you as a human being. Some of you on this call are in your 40s and 50s. You still don't know yourselves. So how can you expect to be a brand that knows itself when you're still in its infancy, when you're still in your new phase of business and your life cycle, and especially now when you're trying to pivot to try and change your characteristics. The thing for me is like brand voice is a really fascinating thing, and it's really come to the fore since with the adoption of social media. Like brands really need to stop and think, what does my brand sound like? And a good way to articulate that and to define that articulation thereof is to actually think about a person that you can relate to. It can be a friend, it can be a celebrity, it can be an international politician, what does your brand sound like, and what does it actually speak like? Does it speak in vernac? Because that's a great idea. If it speaks in like a hoity-toity English, that's another option. So understanding, if you were having a conversation with your brand, what would it sound like is step one in defining personality and making that abstract thing that you spoke about earlier a lot more human, because people want to deal with humans.
Absolutely. So this is a kind of a two-pronged question. One is off the back of that, how you do it. The first thing is, what platforms are you seeing are the best to build a brand? And obviously that is a layered contextual argument. And then attached to that, does it matter which platform you're building around the outcome you want? Because in my world right now, every brand and business should be sales focused. How do you get more sales and revenue up? So how does brand fit into that, and on what platform?
Okay, and then obviously the sales side off the back of that. Thanks, Mike. Shout for the comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. You're too nice, always.
So what I feel is like, so we've got four key pillars in our business. So it's strategy, content creation, content dissemination, and reporting. Okay, so strategy is obviously the understanding of the who, what, where, when, and understanding who all those individuals are that make up your target market. Then once you've defined that, where do they play? Where can we fish where the fish are? And the reality is that, especially from a South African market context, the majority of the fishies are still in Facebook, right? And the majority of the targeting and the ability to convert is still in Facebook. So as much as we like to bash the blue network and we like to make jokes and make fun of it, the reality is the majority of your market can be fished within that market. Fished with an F, not a PH. We don't encourage fishing with a PH. Anyway, so
that makes sense.
Once you identify that, then you can understand the types of content that audience wants to engage with. So, you've got everything from boomers to millennials to zennials to X's, and to really understand who your core market is and how they'd like to be communicated with. And that's a really good starting point to understand what content you can identify. We're so quick to try and I want to be like Nando's, but what is you and what does you mean? I mean, there's brands out there that make the most sexy content out of white papers. If I think about the likes of some of the consulting guys, PwC, they have an outlook that they post every year around digital tech into sub-Saharan Africa and into other parts of Africa. Like, I wait with bated breath with that report to be released because it is so valuable to me in my industry. I get excited about a white paper. I'd go back in time and hit myself in the face with a fish. But you know what I mean? Like, defining what your content is for your audience is the most important part, to marry content creation with the strategy, and then from there disseminating that content. And dissemination then talks to paid, earned, shared, and owned. So what are you doing from running your Facebook ads? Are you running YouTube pre-rolls? Are you working with influencers? Are you doing Google search? Because so many brands stop to think about the basics that work so well. SMS marketing, still incredibly valuable, but so many of us cool early adopters, we're like, we poo-poo SMS. Look at email. You still have such incredible success with email marketing. And there's things like that we take for granted. But if you've got the remarkable content and you're marrying it with the dissemination thereof, then you can stop and you report and say, sure, this mailer that went out now, it's actually driven the leads or the conversions, or this one has less leads or conversions than my previous week. Why is that? Oh, I had Rand on last time. I've got Mike on this week. Sure, huge shift. Obviously, I need to go and focus on a Rand scale quality of interviewee. For example, and these are all things that we stop to set back and say what worked, because we're so busy in the cycle of the conversions that we stop to actually analyze the data, and not data in a big data funnel wanky kind of way, but in a
just the conversions.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was super useful. I thought you were going to punt TikTok because you and I just became friends on TikTok. Man, I'm that network, man.
And I think like this lockdown has really brought TikTok to the fore, because it is the content that's going the most viral, and it's easy for it to disseminate across channels. And everything's got its watermark TikTok, and it's got your username. So TikTok, I was even looking for a professional TikToker the other day. That's what my next hire is, a professional TikToker. You saw what you have first.
That's genius. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago, and the irony of this is that we see other people get famous for doing something. We're like, oh, that's how you get famous. Meanwhile, what they're doing is just being the most version of themselves. And the shining example is Casey Neistat. All he did was be Casey Neistat on video every single day for 365 days a year. And then everyone went, oh, that's how you become YouTube famous. No, that's how he became YouTube famous. And what you've just said is so poignant. You have to know what your brand is about and then be that and find those people. And the great example that I can think of in real life right now is my friend David Perrell, who is a professional racing car driver, but obviously all the races are canceled. He's been streaming on YouTube and he's found his perfect niche. He knows his audience so well that every time he puts a new YouTube video up, it gets 60,000 views and they love him. And he's not about volume. It's not trying to get 1 million views. He's trying to capture a perfect market that then converts to coaching. And he's now coaching his audience on how to be better sim racing drivers. That's niche, and he doesn't need 1 million people. He needs to be the most version of himself. And I love that kind of branding.
Amazing. Yeah, Dave's.
So I want to ask you. It's brutal, man. It's so smart. I want to ask Mike's question, the top voted one right now. Do you think that advertising in the traditional sense still works or matters?
Well, I mean, I've been running a business that does not advertise in the most traditional sense for the last 10 years. So I don't think that there's a right way to advertise. Exactly to Nick's point, it's finding the most you that can talk to the most them. And that's what the way is that you're going to convert customers. And for me, I talk very specifically around who are the most important people within your ecosystem. They're not your customers at first because your customers don't exist. Your friends and your family are your most important influencers because they are the ones that are going to feel sorry for you and help make that first sale, or they're going to pass you on to a second degree network person and say, oh, geez, Mike over here, he's trying to start this thing and he's really struggling, but please just give him a leg up. And I think for me, that's why in those early days, any form of PR or any kind of interviews that people posted about me would go straight into Facebook, go straight into Twitter, and that would then talk to my immediate audience, because the perception that you're actually starting to create momentum is not just a vanity thing. It also helps you internally. Like, momentum is such an important word within these times and within any startup times. Is like, just get those small wins. And sometimes there are projects that we don't want to work on. Sometimes they are tiny ass budgets, but the reality is you need a few quick W's that then lead to bigger wins. I mean, in lockdown phase, I think I've done like 4 or 5 really intense all-nighter kind of presentations. And fortunately, we closed one last week that makes a huge impact on our business and helps us through these trying times. So you've got to just keep ticking away in momentum. The snowball builds, it then creates the avalanche, and boom, it's raining snowflake money.
Earning money. It's such a good point, though, that is often overlooked, that we live in a world of immediacy. And I think TikTok is actually screwing up most people on this. And I'll give you my own example. I've been on TikTok now for a few months, and I've done lots of videos that are on brand for me that just fell flat. I did one video of myself washing the tap because I'm like, the tap's not clean. I got to wash my tap before I wash my hands. 30,000 views.
Insane.
Who knows, right? So the point I want to make here is consistency. We think that we live in a world where you can upload one video and get famous. That is not the world we live in. We live in a world where consistency reigns supreme. I've been blogging on the same web URL for 14 years. That is how you do consistent writing. Not all my articles get seen often, but it's about consistency, and I'm sure that you would say the same thing. Nando's doesn't have one good month. They have consistent good campaigns, and that's the key to their success.
Exactly. And I also think that in conjunction with the momentum comment and what you've just said now, you wrote a great post, which I keep sharing with everybody. And if you haven't seen it, anyone watching on the stream, it's all about like celebrating goals like a footballer. And you make this amazing point about how footballers celebrate every single goal as if it was the first goal ever invented. They take the shirt,
which is insane.
Do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we stop to celebrate these small wins because we're always consuming and going on to the next. SMEs are the absolute worst example of consumer mentality. Just consume and discard, but we don't stop to actually stand there and go, this tastes absolutely delicious. And hopefully our mindset will change now going forward when we've missed out on all of our creature comforts in lockdown.
Yeah, and I think just from a personal and business perspective, in the next 6, 12, 18 months, it's going to be important for the mental health of your team and your culture to celebrate. If you aren't celebrating, you're going to leave your team in the lurch. You're going to leave them in the dark, isolated, staring at a screen. So organize a little celebration party on a Friday and have drinks on Zoom or something to just keep everyone a little bit happier than they were yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wore this jacket, Nick, so that I could go and have celebration.
Yeah. Okay, so you posed me a question that I'm gonna give back to you. My brand ain't broke, so why should I fix it? Are you trying to get with Brandalism everyone to assess their brand, or if it's good, let's just leave it as good?
I think the important thing about now is that your world is going to change regardless. And some brands took a huge spike pre-lockdown because of panic buys and certain elements of product that were added to shopping carts because we didn't know how long we'd actually be in lockdown for. And then the long tail effect of that is that in 2 or 3 months, people will have stocked up on those supplies so that they don't necessarily need them. Then you'll have the impact. So I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to really question, to soul search and brand soul search and say, where can we go from this new way forward, for people to really start looking at what the sentiment is out there in the market and what people are feeling like. Because now we're all spewing our feelings on social. We're all spewing our feelings between WhatsApp groups and on Microsoft Teams and Zooms and Hangouts and whatever tech you use. And if you don't stop to take an opportunity to really understand the essence of where people are at, you're going to see yourself fall short as we come out of lockdown and as we head towards a new normal, whatever that may be. Sports has changed forever. Athletes have started to change the way they think because, now these individuals are all locked down. They are all exactly the same. They're on the common level, whether they're at the twilight of their career, whether they've had injuries, whether they're World Cup winners. All of these individuals cannot participate in their jobs. And that is a huge thing for them psychologically and also from a planning perspective as they go forward. So if you as a brand aren't prepared to think about any evolutions and readjustments in the next 2 or 3 months, then you are going to get found out when we return to a more structured routine.
Yeah, there's some really good questions from the viewers, so I'm going to just stick with them. From Robin, are you predicting any changes in branding and advertising trends going forward? Obviously, we know it's hard to predict, but just curious. We won't record this and show it to you in 2 years. I'm just out of interest.
So I think the one thing is TikTok, because it's allowed us to really value low production and low quality. And also anybody can be a creator now with TikTok and the various CGI and music and other components you can use. The great thing about TikTok and where they've been smart is that because of their 15-second, 30-second, 60-second limits, they actually are negating any music rights. So now brands have a lot more opportunity to sample. Absolute genius. And for me, the research is showing that people are listening to a hell of a lot more podcasts in South Africa. Podcasts had kind of started to grow in South Africa, but still had this early adopter elite kind of view about them. Research in the past had said 6 million South Africans were accessing podcasts. I felt that was a little bit inflated, but going forward now, we've seen a real explosion with podcasting in particular and internet radio streaming because of what the time that we've had on our hands as consumers during this time. So definitely TikTok and podcasting will continue to grow, and I would put my house on that.
Fully agree. My podcast, I've just pasted into the chat. New episode coming out every week called The Curious Cult Show. Go register, sign up, like it, subscribe. Great answer, Mike. Thanks for that. Okay. I'm curious, are you predicting this marketing budget slash if coming back quickly, or and if it does come back, do you think it's going to go back to where it was going to go, traditional, above the line? Like, where do you think brands are going to come back to in the next 6 to 12 months?
So you've got all these economists talking about the Nike swoosh effect. So how the market bottomed out and then picked up quite radically. But South Africa's an interesting one because we almost straddle developed and emerging markets. So we've got those extremes of actual engagement. And a lot of our brands here are based on multinational decision making. So multinationals will move with the times. They'll move with based on junk status executions. They'll really analyze markets more with an economist hat on as opposed to a marketing hat on. And for us, we already started seeing budget cuts being threatened prior to day one of lockdown. And we know that there are brands that we work with that are being directly impacted and affected. And most of the Nike swoosh economist effect shows that you have maybe an 8 to 12 week recovery time post return to normalcy. be. But for me, I like to think that from South Africa's perspective, we're always going to be 3 to 6 times slower in the recovery on that because of those extremes of emerging and developed market that we straddle and the elements that we show out of that space. So I feel that we're in for a bumpy ride. If you look at the States, I mean, there's 22 million people have filed as unemployed since their efforts continued. And sure, they were slower to react, and their leadership was a little bit poo-pooing of the virus, as we've seen on multiple memes. But the reality is that the States is a lot more geared to deal with economic recovery than we are. And for me, like, that's my concern, is like whole industries, whole SMEs, whole businesses, like a whole bunch of legacy stuff has been decimated. And how do those people come back? And will those people that have been burnt, who are business owners, say, cool, I'm going to go work for someone. I'm tired of this slog and this hustle. I mean, I'm unemployable, so I've got to just keep hustling. I've got to keep making it happen.
Yeah, I got no choice. No one's going to hire me. But look, I think you've highlighted a really interesting point that a lot of people are overlooking. 80% of employment in South Africa happens with small to medium-sized businesses, and with 50% of them at risk at this point, and that's the number that an economist just gave me on Business Day TV. Yes. That leaves big businesses and medium-sized businesses and absolutely no small businesses in place. So there is a concern here that this is going to be a big problem. And I don't know how much branding can solve that, to be frank. Yeah. I think this is very deep socioeconomic, but I don't want to get too deeply into that. So I want to answer one of the questions from the audience here. Dax, I think this is a really good question, and I'm going to answer first, Mike, then you can take on. Sure. Do we think that owners and founders should be running things like social media to start off with and build and understand and give a voice to that personality? So from my perspective, unequivocally, that's a yes, for very simple reasons. The first is you never know more about your customers than when you're engaging with them yourself. So I love to get onto Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and just talk to people about what I'm doing. And these live streams are an even more deep way for me to engage with who I think my audience is or could be. The second thing is no one understands my brand better than me in the early days. And at that point in an early startup, you haven't codified what that brand looks like, because it's you, it's in your head. The only way to get that out is to actually get onto the computer and do the stuff yourself. If you're a founder who doesn't want to tweet and you don't want to do the dirty work in the beginning, you're not a founder. Like, that's not how that shit rolls. So that's my take on it, Mike.
Totally agree. And for me, like, you know, this is my issue with you. You've written a book already, and you know, like, the interesting insights that you actually give yourself retrospectively when you're doing that work. But for me, like, those early days are so important that you are your brand. Your brand was defined out of your essence, and it is a living, breathing incarnation of you. So many of these textbooks from Silicon Valley show that, you know, you should be separated from your brand and it shouldn't be key man dependent, because how are you going to scale and sell? And there's all these, like, what you should and should not do's. The one thing that I can unequivocally say that has been the most valuable thing for the growth of my business has been to be personally involved and being in the trenches and looking at those WhatsApp comments, those Instagram comments, the posts on Twitter, what people have to say, where you've been, you've fallen short in terms of your delivery. And as you grow, sure, you put people in places to be almost proxies of you, and you choose teams and you grow teams based on, for me, more of a rapport with those individuals than their qualifications or their credentials. And that's how I love to hire on gut rather than on certification and paperwork. Never asked anyone to see proof of a matric or a tertiary paperwork. Like, I just never do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a degree in journalism, politics, and philosophy, and I've worked at Mail and Guardian, Sunday Times, Business Day, and none of them asked me if I had a degree in journalism, not one, when they hired me. So It's definitely more about action. And I think the world we live in now is actually more about execution, action, agility, adaptability. Those things are what we're looking for. And I think that also plays out into a brand, right? We're not looking for brands that aren't moving with the times. If you're still carrying on with your old ad campaign, sorry, buddy, the world is different and moving on. So that's what I'm kind of looking for in a brand too, is something that's adaptable and movable. There is a question here that it's a little bit of a long one, but I think it's interesting. A lot of articles and opinions online about how the actions you take today, positive or negative, will define your brand or business post-corona. Do you think there's merit in this idea that historically consumers actually have a fairly short memory? They forget bad and they forget good. So do you think that the things you do today matter that much going forward? What do you think, Mike?
I think the results of this thing are so extreme right now, and it's impacting all of us. If you think about your success and failures, they normally occur in isolation, whereas now everybody is feeling success or everybody's all feeling failure. And we were having this conversation here at home earlier around a chain of pharmacies and how there's been research and actual flagging and potential whistleblowing of how they've overinflated hand sanitizer products because they saw the uptick in needing to provide these products, upwards of 200% markups for that product. And those kinds of things, people see through that. And once you get through moments like this, you'll remember that the people that were there for you the most. And I've seen so many tweets about people talking about big brands, financial services companies, or landlord agencies or companies, and saying like, oh, remember the time that you always like banged on my door for that, or you couldn't give me this or that. Like, now I'm in the position where I need your help, and if you aren't willing to help me, I'm going to move on and I'm going to make different solutions and partner with other people who are going to be there to support me going forward. So I think it's one of those things now, like we're all in like some kind of war zone with one another, and we're going to move forward with people that we felt helped us during these times and supported us along this journey.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think one of the interesting outcomes of this lockdown has been communication, good and bad. I'm seeing leaders openly communicate like they've never before. I'm seeing others who micromanage by over communicating. And then I'm seeing brands, and this is from personal anecdotal experience, who I'm hearing from for the first time when they're begging me to contribute to their survival. And that is disingenuous. If you haven't kept a relationship with me, then I am going to have a short memory. I am going to be like, oh, I'm really sorry. I've never heard from you before. I don't know who you are. And why are you trying to ask me for stuff now? Because when I came to you, you didn't help me. And the example for me personally is F&B. F&B's business banking is an absolute shit show. And I warned them. I threatened them. I asked them to help me. I called my private banker. And after 3 weeks of trying, I actually said to them, I'm out. And within 2 days, I'd taken my banking to Capitec, who within 2 hours set me up with everything I needed and have not bothered me since. So yes, consumers are fickle. Loyalty is hard to come by. But on the opposite of that, I'm going to go back to Kevin Kelly talking about 1,000 true fans. There is nothing more fundamental for me than that. And I'm talking a lot about side hustles at the moment. And people often in the world we live in, and Mike, your viral, retroviral thing is to get lots, right? It's about volume and having it go global. I'm much more interested in building 1,000 true fans who pay you $10 a month. If you can do that, and that sounds way more achievable than getting 1 million views on YouTube, 1,000 true fans to pay you $10 a month, you have a side hustle or a business that is earning $10,000 a month.
Very
which
attractive.
is easier, right? Yeah, it's very attractive. And we think, again, we're in this world where we think global is the only way. And I would argue that one of the trends we're going to see shift in the next 2 years is local is going to become important. Small is going to become important. And Paul Graham, the Y Combinator founder, is famous for saying, to build something big, you got to start with something small. And I think we're going back to that, where now we're all trying to save our locals. We're not trying to save like the big globals. We don't care about them. I want to save the burger joint that I love. So that's more important to me, is connect with your consumers from a brand perspective. That's super important, but not for the first time when you need something. Do it consistently.
Like niche verticals are very important for this phase that we're going into now. I just want to give a positive F&B story. Shout out to counter your negative one. I just paid money into the wrong account, and Suzanne and her team helped me get my money back. So yay, F&B for me. Anyway,
he gives, he takes.
So verticals are such an incredible aspect for me. We are working on the sport product, which I've spoken to you about, and doing research and looking at other verticals out there. The restaurant space is very fascinating, obviously off the back of your Save the Local concept. There's a company called Bento Box, which focuses on mobile building for restaurants, and they managed to attract 1,000 customers from around the world, and they hit their first $1 million revenue mark or surpassed it. And now they've gone and they've raised $16.4 million in their Series B. And they, exactly to your point, only have 1,000 customers. only have 1,000 customers and $1 million total revenue in their lifespan, and suddenly they're raising 16.4. Obviously, this is a whole conversation for another day because of VC and the emergence thereof in South Africa and blah, blah, blah. But my point is, if you focus on those verticals and you just are incredibly shit hot at servicing that tribe of 1,000, success is in the wings and waiting.
So I'm curious about the idea of rebranding. There's lots of people now who are considering whether they need to shift their perspective, build a new brand, consolidate what they have. I have experience with Nick Harry, the sock company that I sold last year. We called it Nick Socks to begin with. And I got great advice from the Superbalist CEO. He said, change your brand. No one gives a fuck. No one cares. Yeah. Just change your name. No one cares. And that's exactly what happened. We changed our name. Within one day, we increased our prices, changed our brand, and I had one complaint and 20% increase in revenue. So what do you say about people trying to rebrand now in the midst of a pandemic? Is that batshit crazy, or should you double down while you can?
It's a case-by-case scenario. I mean, I worked on a rebrand of an actual payment gateway solution that uses instant EFTs. They had to change their name because they were on a mission to go Pan-African. And if they were to use the name and the logo devices that they had for the original brand, they would have come into trademark infringement territories across the continent. So for them, it was a long-term strategic play. And the new name and everything was completely different. And we spent a lot of time and energy and effort in trying to land that concept and to move it forward and have a launch. And for them, it was a challenge because being a financial services product, there was a whole trust issue associated with that. People had been used to checking out at the payment gateways of a Takealot or one of the larger merchants, and suddenly that icon didn't exist anymore. So they weren't immediately open to the clickability of going onto that logo. So totally, as all situations, everything is a case-by-case situation. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Depends where you're at, depends what you do. Maybe you want to go down the drastic route, and if it feels right, if it's in your guts, if it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, then give it a crack. But remember that there are certain industries that trust and the association with that brand. You know, you can trust Nick Harry socks versus Nick socks. Like, they still feel so good, ridiculously amazing on my feet.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we've got 15 more minutes or so. If you guys want to keep asking questions, go for it. If you haven't answered the poll, click on polls, answer some questions. Mike, how does one hunt new business in a lockdown? Like, should one even be doing that, or should you rather be cutting costs to try and survive?
There's no right time for hunting business. You should always be hunting business 24/7. Gotta keep up the hustle, brother. No, for me, my leads are always interesting because all the interviews and PR that I've done over the 10 odd years, those have all been really beneficial to my brand building and the backlinks that I've had on all sorts of different channels and different platforms and different news websites. Like, those have all built the organic SEO for Retroviral. So I don't spend a cent on SEO. Like, I'm anti-spending cent on SEO for my business, and we get about 600 or 700 visits to the site a month just from people that have picked up our content through organic SEO means. And in terms of my outreach to potential clients, I will send DMs, or I'll follow people, or I'll always watch people who follow me. For me, Twitter is my most active community, Twitter and LinkedIn. You and I have spoken extensively about the importance of the LinkedIn algorithm and how you have the ability to maximize opportunities because your content can be seen more by people. There's less throttling of the algorithm on LinkedIn. Yeah. But I'll split those up into two things. So for Twitter first, always obsessed with checking out who follows me and checking out certain names that appear in my timeline that I'm unfamiliar with. Always go straight to the bio. Who are they? And then I start developing a rapport with that person, whether they are a media person or whether they are a brand that I've always wanted to work with. And those pieces of outreach are incredibly invaluable for me. And you don't go after the sell immediately. So it's like the same thing. Like, you wouldn't go to a coffee with a potential VC or investor and say, hey, buy my business. You know, and you wouldn't go to a meeting in person with a journalist, hey, write a story about me. So how would you spark up a relationship digitally first, so that when there comes the time for a value exchange, you've given before you've asked to get? So that's the Twitter.
You nailed it. It's absolutely where I was going to go towards. Is I get asked this question in the context of investment. You know, how do we hit you up for investment, or how do I meet investors? The first thing you have to do is add value. If you're adding value, that's when people are going to try and involve themselves with you. And for smaller businesses trying to like raise money, the best type of money raising is sales. And for me, the best type of sales is storytelling. So you don't have to be a hardcore salesperson. You need to be really good at telling your story, talking about the problem and your solution. And I mean, I've mentioned this multiple times on these live streams. There's a great movie, Glen Ross, where Alec Baldwin is the main character and he's standing in front of a whiteboard and he says, A, B, C. Always be closing. Yeah. That's life, right? If you've got your own business and you think that you're struggling with revenue, it's mainly because you're probably not selling hard enough. So get out there and tell your story. What Mike and I are doing right now is telling our story. We're not selling you anything. We're adding value and talking about what we do and how we do it. That's how you sell in a small business, is you tell the story of your brand. And I think that's how you tie brand to sales too. Those things are intertwined.
Totally. And you and I both released our first books at similar times, and for me, it was more of a personal branding experiment. And a friend of ours, Rich Mulholland, he always bangs on about the book being the best business card you'll ever have, because you're getting the name of yourself out there, you're getting the name of the company out there, and you're convincing people to give you interviews because you've written something to basically support the SME ecosystem. I think both of our pieces of literature do that. They are the most time-consuming and demanding pieces of articulation the world has ever asked. Like, I do not encourage you to write a book, and we're both working on second and third ones. And ultimately, the other day, I was trying to grandstand a little bit, and I posted on LinkedIn about, in lockdown times, like, I want to give out my PDF version of my book. Just tell me, send me an email address and I'll send it on to you. And Jesus, I've been inundated for the last week. I posted it last week, Sunday even, because I was trying to be a little bit more experimental. And I've got about 4,000 followers or connections on LinkedIn. And that post has reached 20,000 people organically. And I think I'm on to about my 350, 400th giveaway. Don't tell my publisher, she'll be very disappointed. But to the point, connections that I've met off that. I met a guy from Zambia who's involved in a streaming platform. He raised 60 million rands worth of funding the other day, and he reached out to me and asked for my book. Like, the amount of connections that have just come off my stupid experiment have been so influential in me creating an even greater sphere of influence and a greater network opportunity by giving. It's the value give, right? Like, with no expectation of anything in return. And I think that we all need to kind of open up our palms and give a little bit and give a little bit.
Although, with that said, it's an extremely difficult time to do that, right? And I actually saw a friend of mine, John Sane, posting on LinkedIn today that there are just too many people hitting you up for free shit. And I'm getting the same thing. Can you post about this? Can you write here? Can you give me this? And at some point, we all need to kind of realize we're all trying to survive. Like, this isn't the time to hit people up for the first time in 10 years and ask them for freebies. This is the time to build authentic relationships with real deep value. And then in the space of 2 or 3 years, you can start to ask people for stuff, not upfront.
Yeah, don't be a taker. No one wants to be that guy. And I think that it's read the room. Like, if people are there asking for something, or you desperately need something, like, the worst that anyone can say is no. But don't just come out here onto these social platforms and just try and take. Don't be that guy.
Absolutely. Mike, one fun question here. I'm going to ask you to stand up and show us what pants you're wearing, because someone wants to know if you're actually wearing pants at all.
I'm wearing pants today.
Hell yeah. Thank goodness.
I'm not wearing jocks, but I'm wearing pants for you, Nick.
That's beautiful. Okay, Mike. So we're going to wrap up, but I want you to give us your parting thoughts on the way the world is now, and what you think you can leave people with to kind of go into the weekend feeling a little bit better about themselves.
So I've used this example a couple times now, not in COVID, but just for general people in having a bit of hardship and strife. I started my business in 2010. 2010 was like Zaminamina, such a vibe. And within a couple months of starting that business, I was armed, robbed, I was tied up, had my cell phone stolen out my pocket, had my MacBook stolen out my house, was tied up with a friend of mine, and it was 70 minutes of absolute horrific agony. People say, go back to London. Why did you come back to South Africa? And for me, it was like one of those defining moments of like, I really want to be here and I really want to make a difference. Like, I love the people that I hire. I work really well with my teams. I want to create opportunities for people to start businesses in South Africa. That's why I like doing these kinds of things. That's why I wrote the book. I want to encourage, even if there's just one viewer on the stream or on the YouTube channel afterwards, to start a business because they've been inspired by some ridiculous way of something that we've said. And for me, I have this it's almost like it's out bonus, but for entrepreneurship kind of thinking. So it's almost like a tax out bonus. So I would love government to be able to create a tax out bonus where after 3 years of paying tax as an SME, that you get a percentage of those tax premiums back like you would an out bonus. And then the only way that you can actually unlock that money is if you stay in the business for an additional year, work on an actual exit strategy, and then you use the funds that you've been given to start another business or to invest in another SME under a certain level. And for me, that way, think about how many hustlers out there would start a flying business to earn back that tax, and then how they'd have to invest in another SME to grow forward and to pay it forward. And for me, that's what I want people to take from this journey, is that we've all been in tough positions. We've all been through strife in so many different ways and means. And for me, starting my business and going through that experience and the trauma of being armed robbed and the subsequent trauma counseling and all the stuff that comes with it, and to make it through there and be celebrating our 10th birthday in June, anybody can do it. It's all about resilience, grit, and hustle. Do, fail, learn, repeat. You said it best.
Don't be a dick. Dude, 10 years, that is an achievement. Well done. I hope you guys, when you can, will throw a massive party. That is something to be celebrated. Any business that makes it past 5 years is just astounding. So congratulations and well done. And thank you for giving me your time. I want to leave you guys with what I signed my news. Say again?
Thanks to everybody on the stream. Love your comments. Steve,
yes.
Dad,
yeah,
Robert,
thank you guys.
Kadeko, beautiful. Thank you guys. Amazing comments. Dominique.
So I sign off my newsletter with the same thing every week. Ask more questions of yourselves and others. And I think that's what Mike and I are asking from everyone, is now's the time to question absolutely everything, reassess everything, stick what's making you happy, keep that around, get rid of everything that makes you feel shit. Guys, if you like, follow. What was that?
Life is short, play naked, Nick.
Absolutely. If you like this, please follow me on Crowdcast. Sign up to my newsletter. We do this every Friday at 2 p.m. Someone new, even on the public holiday. We've got the Pargo founder joining me to talk about the world of logistics in this insane time. Mike, have a rocking weekend, man, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for your time. Peace.